What is the state of New York State law specifically at the moment regarding sexual preference?
Okay, well, there is a law in New York State, as there is in all but 4 states in the country, against sodomy.
6 now.
6 now. Okay, and actually the sodomy law discriminates against heterosexuals as well as homosexuals, because the government actually states that it can tell you how to have sex, and that's only in the missionary position with the man on top. So that, according to the sodomy law, you're breaking the sodomy law if you commit fellatio or have any kind of sexual experience, even with the person you're married to, other than the man on top in the traditional sexual position for procreation. But unfortunately, this law is almost exclusively used for homosexuals, and there are several thousand people around the country, at least, who are caught on charges of sodomy every year. But there are virtually no, or relatively few, cases of heterosexuals who are ever caught by this law.
Liberties Union, who has been with us, and I have been joined now by Stephen Ashkinazy and Ebun Adalona. And we're going to start with Stephen. These are 2 people who you will see are people of some considerable accomplishment, who are at this moment involved in a suit against the police because both of them have been brutalized. Stephen by the New York City police, Ebun by the federal authorities. Stephen Ashkinazy, just to give you a few credentials, owns 2 restaurants in the village. He is a member of the Community Planning Board in the village. What number Community Planning
Community Board 2.
Community Board 2. He has served as the executive director of the Youth Task Force for Andrew Stein, Borough President of Manhattan. And he had a rather appalling encounter with the police not too long ago, and I want you to tell us about it.
Yes, this was exactly a year ago, last summer. I was participating in a demonstration in the gay community against the film Cruising. And it began as a very typical night. I've been on many demonstrations going way back to the anti-war demonstrations, and I've been active for a long time in the gay community. And I certainly wasn't expecting anything to go wrong. And I was there as a marshal, making sure that the demonstration stayed as peaceful as possible, and had said hello that night to many of the policemen from the 6th Precinct who I know from my work on the community board.
That's your precinct?
That's one of our precincts. And so at one point in the demonstration, when I was crossing from one crowded area to get to another area to see what was going on when there seemed to be a commotion, and I felt that my help might have been needed, I was isolated in an area for a while that was away from everybody, and my path was blocked by a policeman who assumed a posture like a football tackler. And so I decided not to cross his path, and I turned back in the opposite direction, and there was another policeman there. And they started to close in on me, and so I decided, well, you know, the worst that will happen is they'll arrest me, but nothing more than that. I wasn't afraid. And I lifted my hands to show I was offering no resistance, which I didn't. I offered no resistance. So I was very surprised when they pulled me over to a parked car nearby and forced me down backwards on my back, and then demanded that I turn over, which was impossible because they were holding me down. And when I didn't comply, one of them hit me in the stomach with his club. And I had the good foresight at the time to look at his badge number and his name and repeat it to his face, thinking that this is clear thinking, and surely when he realizes how logical I'm being and that I know who he is, nothing more will happen. So I repeated his badge number to him and his name, and felt that that would be the end of it. But they continued to hit me, and I was dragged on the floor, and before I knew it, there were 6 policemen standing over me, clubbing me and kicking me, stepping on me.
Saying things to you, Stephen?
I don't even remember. I don't remember. I remember forcing myself not to struggle, because my training has taught me that if you offer no resistance, you're less likely to get hurt. But it finally got to the point, one of them had his hand over my mouth and nose to suffocate me, and another one was digging his club straight down into my stomach. And then I was scared. Then I thought that this is it. I'm going to die. Steve, take a last look at the world around you. This is the last thing you're ever going to see. And then then I blacked out, because then I remember being dragged to the police car where I was in such pain. I asked to be taken to the hospital, or to see a doctor is what I asked. And if it wasn't for the fact that eventually a legal observer came by and demanded that this person needs to see a doctor, he's very sick, they wouldn't have even done that. They just wanted to arrest me. And I had often no resistance. And what I remember so clearly when I was being beaten, and even at the beginning, was this look of hatred in the eyes of the police that were doing it. It was not irrational. It was an animalistic look. It was terrifying.
And they charged you with reckless endangerment.
Yes.
You are, we talked about this before, you are 5'9",
145
pounds, and there were 6 of them.
Wearing helmets and with clubs. Those charges, by the way, when they were brought to the district attorney, he refused to even hear them. They were just thrown out of court. There was so much testimony. Unfortunately, because I am a leader in the community, I'm well known, there were a number of witnesses who came forward of good standing, including one person who's on the Human Rights Commission. And there was just no legitimacy to the claim, which was used to harass me, that I had done anything to instigate, to cause.
Not a bad point. Steve Ashkinazy joins us, Director of Clinical Programs for the Institute for Protection of Lesbian and Gay Youth. It's your organization, in cooperation with the City of New York, established this school.
We established a school, and I have to say that I think it's an unfortunate thing that there needs to be such a school. I would rather there not be a need. I don't think that segregated schools are a good idea either. At the Institute, where we counsel young people who are lesbian and gay with all sorts of problems, we saw the need continually. We saw young people who were coming to us who had dropped out of school, been discharged from schools, pushed out of schools because they were being humiliated, they were being beaten up. They had such a terrible time in school that the whole idea of going to school just turned them off.
I sense this audience appears to be against your idea. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me, because I think that the facts in the case are not very well understood, and I hope that we can clear up some of the issues.
The average American does not have the opportunity to witness the kind of vulnerability that does exist among young gays who do loiter, for lack of a better word.
That's because most young gays either do not tell anybody, and I wouldn't say they live in relative comfort, as it's been pointed out. They live in great turmoil. I think all 3 of us who are gay up here on this panel have attempted to commit suicide when we were younger because we were under so much pressure. I think that's what young people go through. Then you have that other element that is more vocal about it, and they just drop out.
Right.
You know, you can't counsel people in the regular school systems if they've already dropped out. You have to have a program that's going to reach out and bring them.
Well, first, I'd like to say that I think it's about time that this situation has been addressed and these students are getting the kind of counseling that they need. But I don't think that an education environment is the right situation, because they can't live in the gay community their whole life and never come into contact with the heterosexual community.
Well, for one thing, they're not living in the gay community all their life. They're going to a school, and although they are getting counseling, as was pointed out before, I agree with Mr. Kaplan that segregation is not the answer to prejudice. But if we wait until prejudice stops before letting these kids get an education, they're never going to get an education. We're going to be supporting them on welfare for the rest of their life.
I don't think you have to reinforce that fact time and time again. If a Jewish person does something, do all the Jews have to say, hey, that's great? Or if a black person does something, isn't that
we do.
Isn't that segregation
Jewish, and that's
also?
how I was taught to be proud that I was a Jew.
Jewish. Mr. Ashkinazy, you wear a yarmulke. Are you an Orthodox Jew?
I'm an Orthodox Jew.
And how are you doing in the synagogue with this?
Well, I had a lot of support within the Orthodox community. I certainly know many Orthodox Jews who are gay, most of whom are not as open about it as I am, but many of them are really happy that I'm doing it and feel that their life will be a little bit better because I am. And I will say that as far as, you know, being accused of being sinning, a sin is something that a person has to choose to do or not to do. Being homosexual is not a choice, and therefore I think that a person has to address their religious beliefs with the best of intentions, make a great effort. I believe in the Bible, and I think it's a great blueprint for how we can perfect our lives, but I have yet to meet a person ever who lived entirely 100% in agreement with every biblical commandment.
And we'll be back in
A
just a minute.
picture from Mr. Ashkinazy as to how these students are performing in school. Are they punctual? Are they coming to school? What's their attendance? Have they focused attention on work?
From not having attended school at all, or being chronic truants, most of them have beautiful attendance. They're doing wonderfully in school. Their scholastic achievement is very high, and they have a very positive attitude towards learning and going on to college.
I want to accept other people. It's like we're brought up on a way, this is what's right and this is what's wrong.
I think that's a very important point, that we have to distinguish that a high school, you know, is a very dangerous place. We talked about the fact that every college has a gay group on campus. It's very easy to be gay in college. But high school, during adolescence, when people are very intolerant of differences.
Well, that's the whole point about high school, though. You make your friends, you start out small and you make your friends and you get your cliques there, and you don't really need the counseling.
If you're lucky and well-adjusted.
How does the school teach them to deal with society after high school? Because there's just going to be as much prejudice after
No, it does, and they also get counseling at the Institute. And they also live in society. They watch the Brady Bunch, they watch the Partridge Family on television. These are the shows that, I mean, they live in a straight society.
Kids are...
Adolescence can be a difficult time for any young person, but for the homosexual adolescents, the experience can be especially traumatic. Steve Ashkinazy is the clinical director to the Institute for the Protection of Gay and Lesbian Youth in New York City. It operates an alternative school known as the Harvey Milk High School. It's designed for gay youngsters with special problems. And it's nice to have you with us.
Good morning.
I'd like us to start out, because you grew up as a gay person. What is it like for a young teen to be dealing with this?
It's so difficult. That's why I really understand and why I enjoy the work that I do now. I knew that I was gay from the time I was 12, and by the time I was 14, the need to go out and meet other people like myself was so great that I left all of the support systems I knew without telling my family or my friends in school. I needed to go places, and the only places that were available were bars, were very, you know, degenerate types of areas, which I would not recommend for any youngster. But the need was so great that I had to seek them out.
That you were really cutting off family and friends, and for you, your religion, Orthodox Jew,
Yeah.
it must have been a very difficult thing to turn your back on all of that.
Yes. What's difficult for a young person coming out and realizing that they're gay is that they have not had any preparation. I mean, they might know that they're Jewish or Catholic or black or from Brooklyn or whatever, but suddenly they discover that they're also part of a culture that they've never met, and they have and all the support systems that they've had, their church, their religion, are
and
no
to top
longer.
it off, though, and that is socially unacceptable, and particularly from the parents' point of view.
In fact, in most cases, all of the support systems, their family, their church, their friends, their school, probably have given them messages that this is a very bad thing to be, that this is sinful, it's sick, it's immoral.
What does the Institute do to try to help combat all of these things?
Okay, at the Institute for the Protection of Lesbian and Gay Youth, we have it's a social service program. We provide counseling, not only to the youngsters, but also to many families who are willing to come there.
But they're all facing them. What do you say to the parents out there?
Okay, there's a number of messages I have for parents. One, if you know that your son or your daughter is gay, don't feel guilty about it. It's nothing that you did. Society puts a lot of pressure on parents, making them think that they must have done something wrong in raising their kids. And that sometimes leads to, the guilt sometimes leads to them throwing the kids out or being violent or angry with them. But there's another message too, because this issue affects so many more people than realize it. I have heard so many stories from parents who wonder why their children aren't closer to them, why they move to cities far away, why they don't come home for the holidays. And many of them wonder why their kids aren't closer to them and don't even know that the reason is because their sons or daughters are gay and are afraid that if they come home, they might have to talk about it, and are afraid to face their parents and say that because they think that they might be rejected.
But they really want to go home.
They want to go home. They want to be close, and they separate themselves because they're more afraid of the real rejection, so it's easy to run away than face being rejected by your parents.
But I'm not sure that everybody knows what Hetrick Martin does.
Well, until about 2 years ago, the Hetrick Martin Institute was known as the Institute for the Protection of Lesbian and Gay Youth. And we've been around since 1980, specifically taking care of that population. We were aware of the salt mines and, of course, of the problem of homelessness and the youth in crisis. on the west side, and in fact, about a year and a half ago, we instituted a special outreach program within our agency to deal specifically with those kids, and we have a team of people on the streets after hours. One of the reasons why it was so easy to overlook this problem, you know, that the community has not been aware of how serious it is that these kids are out late. You know, when most people are at home around the television with their families, that's when these kids really start to deal and to come away, to be putting themselves at risk.
We appealed in 1987 to HRA and asked for a crisis shelter. And they yes, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, you're on an issue I really want to talk about.
Right.
When we talk about the responsibility that the city and the state are neglecting, I think what we have to address is how these kids got to the street. And I think that the programs that are lacking right now are the preventative programs, the intervention. We're reading a lot in the papers now about child abuse, and we're seeing an expanding drug problem, not only among kids, but among the parents that are making the whole family unit break down. And that's the reason we're seeing kids on the street. We're seeing a lot of kids who are falling through the cracks. And one of the reasons that our agency has come into existence is because what we've seen is that, you know, lesbian and gay teenagers are under, you know, extreme pressure. They have the double problem that a lot of professionals in the agencies don't know how to deal with lesbian and gay youth. And one of the things we do besides working directly with the kids is we go out and we train the agencies. Covenant House has been very good in the last couple of years. They've incorporated our help, and we go in and we run regular on-site, you know, in-service professional training for the staff, and it's really improved the situation. Because what we've found is that wherever you go, is that the staff and other agencies, you have professional people, you know, social workers who have never ever sat through a workshop or a conference dealing with the issue of homosexuality, no less, you know, just working with, you know, homosexual youth. So that has to be addressed.
Where do these young people go? They're talking about fixing up, hopefully in the future, buildings, etc. But we're talking about minors now, and ideally kids. If you could have the money tomorrow and you had a city that would listen to it, what would you want them to do?
These kids really need, you know, nurturing, you know, protective love and love. See, a lot of people think that because they're on the street that maybe they're a little misguided, but they're pretty independent, and a lot of people think, well, you get them a job, give them a little bit of job training, but the remedial help they need is so much greater than that. They can't hold a job. They don't know what it means to show up the same day twice in a row at the same time. The reason that they're selling the bodies on the street is only partially an economic one. Partly it's because they've had so little love in their life that when they hit the street, they mistake the attention that they're getting for the love that they never got.
Estimates 40 to 50% of those young people are lesbian and gay and homeless. Up until now, nothing has been done for them in terms of housing. There has been no special housing for lesbian and gay youth. Steve Ashkinazy, who was a longtime gay activist, has decided to change that with something called Madrigal House. What's Madrigal House going to be and do?
Well, Madrigal House is a small attempt to finally provide some program that will provide housing for lesbian and gay youth. There have been many attempts over the last dozen years at least to get the city and the state to provide some group home or shelter for lesbian and gay youth. Promises has been broken, so I finally decided you can't sit back and wait for other people to do it, you have to go out and do it yourself.
So Madrigal House will
provide a space for 12 young people to live in a very home-like environment. It's kind of like a community residence where people will be able to live there, go to school. They'll have social services to help them get into vocational training so that if they can stay there for a year or 2 years.
Steve Ashkinazy, you've been at this a long time. You were back there in the original days of Gay Activists Alliance. You helped found the National Gay Task Force. You founded the Harvey Milk School and worked at the Hedrick Martin Institute for 8 years. And you're at it again.
I've been at a lot of beginnings, and I'm still here, a Jurassic gay activist.
I hope Madrigal House keeps going for a long time. We'll be back in a moment.